Welcome to Brave with Lisa. This space is designed to inspire, champion, and equip you to bravely walk in that unique rhythm of grace and calling that God has designed just for you. I'm so excited you're joining us today. Welcome to Brave with Lisa. I'm your host, Lisa Bruton, and today I have my gorgeous friend, Angela Williams, and I am so excited to have her here with me. One, because we don't get to catch up enough, so we get to catch up here. But two, because she does walk with such wisdom and grace, and she has quite a story. So welcome, Angela.
Thanks, Lisa. It's so good to be here. Thanks for inviting me on your podcast.
Oh, well, we've just done a recording for your podcast, so it's been great. I've got to see you a little bit more.
Well, I just feel like we're doing podcast ping pong.
Oh, so fun. Now, Angela, would you mind sharing with us what your world looks like at the moment and what you're passionate about?
Yeah, well, passionate about people, always about people, encouraging people, making sure that they are, encouraging people to live life well and to live life large, to dream big, to have faith, and, to give life all we've got. That's probably my biggest passion. My world looks like, well, I'm a mother of a 19-year-old son, and he's gone off to uni. So he's just finished his second year at uni. I can't believe it.
Wow.
Time just goes so fast. I know he was like this high, and now all of a sudden he's like way up here. So this has kind of freed up a little bit of time for me and my husband. I'm married to Noel, been married 26 years this year.
Well
I know,
done.
I get it. I don't look old enough. I know.
You don't.
So we're kind of in this season now where life has opened up to us, that we can actually go and do some of the things that perhaps you can't do when you're raising your family. So, we're involved heavily in our church, do some preaching, some hosting there. We run some of the teams in our church. And also, as you've mentioned, I run a podcast that's called the Gold Diggers Podcast. And really that started about June this year, me and my co-host. And it's really about encouraging people, just bringing out the gold in people, digging for the gold. And it's just people in everyday walks of life. Nobody particularly famous or doing anything amazing, even though they may feature on the podcast from time to time. But really, it's about everyday people and just trying to find the gold in them. So that's kind of the main thing I'm doing at the moment. But I've also written a book.
You have?
This is my book here, which is it's called Extravagant Life to Extravagant Love. And it was released in October last year. So it's been over a year now of that book, and that's all about my life story up to sort of maybe 10 years ago, and that's gone so well. And so that's opened up a lot of kind of speaking opportunities for me. So between all of that, I'm pretty busy.
Yes, you are. It is quite hard to to pinpoint you in the time, exactly. Which is so understandable. Now, I would love to hear a bit more about your book, because it is quite a different story to what a lot of other people have walked or know.
Well, it's called Extravagant Life to Extravagant Love, and it's really about two sides of life and the two sides of life that I've experienced. So I grew up in a very wealthy home. You might be able to tell I've got a British accent. I know you know this, Lisa. It's beginning to get a bit more Aussie-fied now.
It is.
But I grew up in an English wealthy home. My father is a British Lord, which kind of happened a bit later in my life. And Christian family, and they started a charity called Christian Vision, which the mandate is to touch 1 billion souls with the gospel. It's an amazing story, really, how all that came about for my father. And it's a goal, actually, I think, that they reached last year sometime.
I've heard that.
Yeah, so that was started in 86, and we're now 2020. So it's a vision that has been on sort of my father's life for decades. And so it's great to see a vision start and then find its completion. But of course, the great thing about vision is it can continue,
right?
And it is forever moving and ever expanding. So grew up in this family that was really influential around a lot of important people, both in the Christian world and in the political world and the business world. And so with that came, for me, a lot of stigma, particularly in places like school. I used to get called the rich kid. And there is this kind of impression or prejudice, if you like, with people that have money, that are wealthy. There's this impression that, oh, you know, their standards are very high. They never actually will be interested in me. My house isn't nice enough. My car isn't nice enough. You know, there's a lot of materialistic impressions that go around being called the rich kid. And that used to separate me and isolate me from, you know, real people and real life. And I desperately loved people. I just desperately wanted to be part of a team, part of the crowd, and nobody in particular. And so that really sent me on this journey with God as well, because I knew that God had called me as well. And there's this scripture that's, to whom much is given, much is required. And I always had this sense of responsibility that, you know, God's blessed us with so much that I know that he's going to require so much from me. But I always felt that there were these barriers really to be able to kind of, you know, as I've said, those stigma, those barriers that prevented me from ever really pursuing those things. But eventually it just kind of led to this moment where one day I just felt like God put it on my heart. I want you to put food and drink in the back of your car. And I just drove out into the red light area of my local city. And I just started to stop to girls that were working on the streets. You know, there were a few other things that led up to that moment. One in particular, and actually this is where my book starts. It's this tunnel scene where I'm in Manchester, and Manchester's this, it's an industrial town, and it's known to be quite a violent place. Sorry, my dogs are scratching at the door. It's known to be quite a violent place, and they have a big red light area there. And we went to connect with a charity that were up there. This was my first experience of ever being in a red light area. I wanted to see what actually happens. What does this look like? Because I'd only got the impression of like Pretty Woman. I don't know if you've watched that movie.
Yes.
So I had this image of like Julia Roberts in her, you know, dressed up, got nice makeup on, looking presentable. But the reality of what I saw was completely life-changing for me. And I remember there's this one scene where the book starts, and it's like we got into a taxi and asked the taxi driver to take us to this location. And he literally stopped just on the other side of this tunnel that went under a railway. And he said, "This is as far as I'm going to take you. I'm not going to take you any further," because he was too afraid to go through this tunnel. And so I was with two other girlfriends, and we were just there looking through this dark tunnel. And this was kind of that moment. Okay, God, is this really you that's asking us to do this? We believe that it is, and therefore we just believe that you're going to be with us and you're going to keep us safe. And so I walked through this tunnel. And really it felt like a significant moment in my life where I stepped from one world where it's full with this, you know, extravagant life, into really where my purpose and calling was. And it required a brave step. And so we reached the end of the tunnel and then got into the red light area. And I remember meeting my first ever prostitute, and her name was Andrea. And just having, like, I was like a rabbit caught in headlights. I had no clue what to say, how to talk to them. My world was so different. You know, I grew up with a helicopter in my backyard, a basement swimming pool, you know, just like a crazy life in comparison. But I've never felt more purposeful than in this moment right there, looking face to face with her. And she was actually a bit funny. She said to me, "Oh, you've got a pretty face. You fancy some work?" And I was like, "Whoa, how do I respond to this? I have no idea." But anyway, from that moment, I started to kind of get to know her a little bit. And she just said that just 2 days before, she'd actually just given birth to a little girl. And something in me just sunk. And I was like, oh, I've not long had a child myself, and just like how could I not do something about this? If a woman can actually leave her 2-year-old daughter with a neighbor, she'd left her with a neighbor, that there must be such a pull, and it was the drugs and the alcohol and the addiction that was such a pull that a mother could do that I'm like, how can I not? If, with me in a position where I can actually do something to help, how can I not do something about this? And then that leads really into the starting of a charity. I went back to my city and started a charity and built that, and it was called Embrace, which is actually still running today, and we're like, oh, it's been nearly 20 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, because, well, no, maybe not, because my son's 19, he was about 2, so it's about 17 years.
That's amazing.
That's been running. Yeah, and it just like I learned so many things in that journey, Lisa. I learned a lot about my own prejudice.
Yeah.
Even, you know, I felt that people had prejudice towards me because I was from a wealthy family, but it actually made me see that the areas that I did, and I made assumptions about people based on how they appeared, you know, or how they looked. And so that really kind of cut through all those ideals for me. And it really brought me down to, you know, this is actually where God's called me. He's called me to the unreachable ones, and the ones that other people reject and cast off, because that's where his love is like. And to be able to take his love into those places, we often think it's difficult, but it's the easiest thing in the world, because they are so void of it and they just so need it that, like, you could just say, God, can I pray for you? And straight away, you know, they want prayer, because to them that's like giving them such a beautiful gift, because nobody would consider them in that way. And so, yeah, it was a life transforming experience that has really framed the whole of my life now.
I bet it has. And so I'm curious, Angela, because I know, you know, you have this interaction with Andrea and something stirring, and you know it's God. How do you take that? And, you know, you started a charity, but what's the in between? Like, how do you go from that moment to having a charity?
Great question. Like the charity that we went to in Manchester, they just allowed us to come for the day. But I really took their model, and I looked at their model, and I looked what works, what doesn't work, spoke to them. They were really great in mentoring us in being able to help start Embrace. So I did that. I got the model of what we wanted to achieve. Then went back to our hometown, and I actually volunteered at another organization. Wasn't doing exactly the same as what we wanted to do, but similar. They were working with a similar group of women, and I actually volunteered for them for 2 years.
Wow.
And they knew that we were going to be starting this charity, and they were really accommodating and very great to enable us to be able to be amongst the women. So that helped me to really get familiar with, how do you even hold a conversation with somebody that's in this lifestyle, because that can be really difficult. You don't know what you can say, what you can't say. So this was like a community group. They would come in and have lunch together, do some arts and crafts, and you could build relationship with the women. So that was so foundational for us in being able to start Embrace. Then when we actually went out into the red light area for the first time, thinking, oh, we're going to know all the girls because we've met them all, didn't know one of them. They were completely different women. So the girls we'd met at this drop-in I was volunteering at, they were girls that were kind of in their recovery. Can you hear that? There's builders behind me now.
That's so fun.
So they were in their recovery, and but the street girls, the outreach girls, were very difficult to kind of connect with, because they were working at night. So in the daytime they were asleep.
Yes.
So actually they were a whole new group of women, and I just remember thinking, okay, I felt like I'd trained and prepared for this moment, but when it came to it, I was completely unprepared. And so we tried to connect with the women, say, hey, we've got some food and drink in the back of our car. but they looked at you suspicious, like, who are these crazy people?
Yeah.
Why would they want to come and, you know, do this for nothing?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're suspicious of you because you don't get something for nothing in their world.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen. So eventually, after a couple of weeks of trying, I eventually asked one of the girls that we'd met at the drop-in, would you come on the outreach with us and make an introduction? And that's really what started it. So she came. I've called her Kate, I think, in the book. I don't like to say the real names, but I think her name's Kate in the book. And she came on outreach with us, and then she was such a great ambassador for us, and she would introduce us to all the women and say, hey, these guys, you know, they're just here to help and come and have food and drink. And so that's really how it began. And then from there we just built it up. We made sure, these were the things we made sure, that we were consistent, that we turned up when we said we were going to turn up, even if we knew they weren't going to be there. You know, we turned up. Like, this is England, so weather's not great. So it's rain, hail, snow, whatever, we were out.
Wow.
And also we made sure it was just non-judgmental. We allowed them to speak to us about what they wanted to share. We always offered them prayer. And we even offered hygiene packs, and in there were condoms. Now, we actually did hit a bit of controversy over
I can imagine
on condoms to the girls, particularly, you know, some of our church folk weren't particularly in support of that decision. But I really went to God about that, because I'm like, you know, a lot of people can think that giving condoms actually endorses their decisions, and that's not what we were doing. We were, to me, the condoms, were the hook that brought them to the back of the car, because that's what they wanted the most. But it also says, we're meeting you where you're at. Right. We understand, because there's so many different reasons why somebody will end up in that position. We understand that, you know, this isn't something you've chosen to do. This is something that, you know, it's almost like they have to do it, even though we know that there are ways that they can get out of this life. But it is really, really difficult. And so we went to God about it, and God gave me complete peace about it. And, you know, I think actually offering the condoms was the thing that really connected them to us. Because it brought them back consistently, and enabled them to know that we weren't there to judge them. So,
And don't you love how God works outside of the boundaries and the walls of how we think or what we think is appropriate? He's like, offer them condoms. Like, I'm sure that idea was planted from him.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, originally we even had cigarettes, but then that one didn't sit with me for a while. And then we thought, no, so we actually did get rid of the cigarettes, but the condoms we kept. And another thing we did, which isn't probably usual for organizations that work in the red light area, particularly Christian ones, is we involved men. That was a big decision that we took to, like, our team, as should we involve men. And you know what I found with men is actually they had this sense of injustice on behalf of the women, and they felt like they needed to correct that you know, for men that have mistreated them. And they felt this real sense of responsibility that we need to put this right. We need to put this right of how they view men by being righteous and loving towards them. But we'd always do it in a way that it was amongst a couple. So we'd have couples, but the men were brilliant. They were so good in this arena. When they were with their wives, it was lovely. And we had, like, even older couples that were like the grandparents.
Oh, I love that.
And so we just created this community where they felt loved, accepted, not judged, and created this great environment where they could heal.
Incredible, Angela. And, you know, something that really stands out to me in your story, and there's so many parts to it, is that you did the uncomfortable. And boy, it must have been uncomfortable when you started to go out and you just weren't quite connecting, and yet you still continued. I just think that's incredible. And there's that can be something that will stop us from moving in the things that God has for us, because it's uncomfortable and we don't know what we're doing. And rather than sticking at it, we'll step back from it. So I love that you actually stepped further into it rather than ran away from it.
Well, it's that thing that I said, like, whole lot of, what did I say? Mine's gone blank. When to whom much is given, much is required. So there was this real sense of, this is required of me. It might not be required of everybody else, but it's required of me. And therefore I know that I have to keep continuing. I have to keep pursuing and enduring. And actually I did find, because obviously it's a very vulnerable and volatile circumstance to be in, an environment to be in, and anything can happen at those moments. But that it's actually when you go into those spaces that your faith rises, and I am totally dependent on God, because I do not have, I don't know karate. I don't know martial arts. I don't know how to defend myself at all, but I don't need to, because God's my defender. And there was this, every time, like I could be driving to outreach from my home, feeling a bit nervous, praying, thinking, okay, God, I have no idea what to expect tonight. The moment I would get there, and I've got a team in the car with me, and the moment I'd step out onto that pavement, it was like this thing would happen. And it was like, I know exactly what I'm doing, even though I don't in here, but like, just God takes over. And I had a confidence which I personally didn't have. So it's only God can do that, hey?
Oh, absolutely. It's incredible. And I love that it's still going. And I have no doubt that it's continued to grow. But how beautiful that you got to pioneer that. And
I actually just spoke with them the other week, and they're doing another one in another city now as well. So it's expanding even more. I'm just
wonderful.
Like so happy. And they've kept it to the heart of what Embrace is about, which is really just loving the girls right where they're at. It's, that message, just to embrace them, has continued for nearly 20 years. And I'm just like, I'm
and
so
it doesn't have to be
that.
complex, right? Like, it's actually a very simple value, like mandate that you have in that, but that's what lasts.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
Okay, and I need to ask you, because I have seen this new Angela, I wouldn't say improve, but just like adventurous, and this other side of you really coming out in the last year to 2 years. And I actually don't know the story, and I want to hear what happened and how come I'm seeing you jumping out of planes and doing all sorts of amazing things.
You might be surprised what triggered this, actually. So I've been in Australia now for 11 years. So for 10 years, really, it was just focusing on raising our son, just doing the family life thing. And I guess when you're in that season, particularly as a mother, it's almost like any of your own things kind of just put to the side, and you really focus on your family. And we willingly and lovingly do that. But last year, my son went off to uni, his first year of uni. And as I said, I feel like we're in this whole new season of we're able to kind of embrace, what do we want to do? What does life look like for me? I'm actually in the process now of writing book number 2, and it's called So What's Next? It's taken me ages to write it because I'm still living it. Really, it's in that transition season where life really changes. So you go through a real significant life change at this stage in life. I'm heading towards my 50s, and family's now no longer in the home full time. And so for some, it can feel like, oh, this is just like, I'm just waiting for grandchildren to come along, or, my purpose in life feels like it's over. But actually, I feel like it's just begun.
Yeah.
And so in July last year, I was actually up on the Great Barrier Reef and with family, and we'd gone on like a whale swimming expedition, if you like, to swim with minke whales. Amazing. And I remember I'd got in the water. I had a dive instructor with me, and it was just the two of us, because I was new in the water again. I hadn't been diving for about 10 years, and I felt really nervous. So he stuck with me, and all the family went off and was diving. Anyway, so we surfaced a little bit earlier than the rest of them, and right when a minke whale just came up to me, and it was really close.
Wow.
And it was just one on its own at the time, and it just starts circling around you. And I cannot even explain this feeling that happens, but it's something so majestic that just happens to you. It's like I am the closest to creation I think I've ever been. Something as pure as, it's kind of untainted by the world, if you like. This is actually how God created you to be. And so, and a lot of people that swam with minke whales will tell you that, a lot of marine biologists and everything, they say there's something about a minke whale that when you have an encounter with one, it changes your life.
Wow.
And so a lot of them that I've spoken to have said that, and I definitely had that experience. So my dive instructor then went off to go and get all the other divers, and I was left on my own in the open ocean. There was no land around. Our little boat was far off, and this whale just swam around me. And it just came up to me. It's almost like it spoke to me, and it gave me a wake-up call. At the same time, I was also reading Erwin McManus's book, It's the Last Arrow, and it's really about don't leave any arrows in your quiver. Don't leave anything on the table. Just give life everything you've got. And it was really speaking to me, and it was almost like that whale moment just woke me up and said, "You've got to start living." Like there's so much life ahead of you. There's so much purpose that you haven't yet fulfilled. You've got to start living. And it's like I just woke up to that. That same trip, we were near Lizard Island, and there's this big mountain, if you like, that we went to climb. And I was 46, and I nearly died to get to the top. I was so unfit, and I was like, I've got to do something about this. And we can, when we look at our fitness levels. You're very fit, Lisa, so maybe you don't have this challenge. But we look at our fitness levels and think, one day, it'll happen one day. But we never actually make daily decisions towards a long-term goal. And I knew that the only person that's ever going to change how physically unfit I am is me. And I was looking down the barrel of 60, 70. I'm looking at those decades, and I'm thinking, I want to be somebody that's active, that's sharp in my mind, that's still physically able to do all the things that I want to do, that wants to travel and, be active. And if I don't do something about this right now, then that's never going to happen. And so, it's almost like that whole moment with the minke whale just triggered that. And so I then went on a weight loss journey. So I lost in about 4 months, I lost about 20 kilos.
Wow.
And then and then I set myself the challenge that I wanted to run a half marathon.
So impressive.
Well, I'd actually, previous to this, as you know, Lisa, I had a number of years where I actually wasn't very well. I had about a 5-year period where I had a sickness that was undiagnosed. They couldn't get to the bottom of what it was, and it meant I couldn't exercise. I was quite debilitated. And I remember just one desperate moment in that where I actually was in my walking robe. I got on my knees to God, and it was probably 4 years in. And I just said, I just don't know that I can believe anymore, that I can believe that I'm going to be healed. I know all the things I need to do. I know about praying. I know about declaring. I know about taking ground. I know about standing in faith and declaring in faith. I've done all of those things. And I'd got to the point where I just was defeated. And I was like, God, I can't keep going. And I felt him say to me, I'm not asking you to believe in your healing. I'm asking you, do you believe that I am good? Oh. And I just thought, if my faith is only that small, that's the only thing I can believe, is that, yes, God, you're good. And then I felt him say, but do you believe I am good to you? And that's a harder question
That
to
is
answer.
a big question.
And so I really had to kind of consider that while I was on the floor. And I just said, yes, God, I do believe that you are good to me. And that is the basis of my faith, right? And so from that point, I said, God, if you get me through this, I'm going to run a half marathon in recognition of what you've done. Like this. And at the time, I made that commitment, not thinking I was ever going to have to fulfill it, because I really didn't know. And so then this point with the whale happened, and I woke up about, physically, I need to get fit. So I set myself the challenge, I'm going to run the half marathon, which meant I had to lose a shed load of weight, and I had to start running. Now, I couldn't even run to the end of the driveway without collapsing. So to run 21.1 kilometers was a big task. But I've learned, like, just daily decisions. I started by running 1 minute. I was exhausted, running 1 minute and walking 5 minutes, running 1 minute, just gradually built up like that. And at the same time, then this whole thing about living life to the full. So I jumped out of airplanes, swam with sharks really close, big frenzy of sharks at feeding time, big tuna heads that had come down. And
amazing.
It's just a bit crazy, but yeah, I'm embracing life. And in the same time, I've released a podcast, written a book, writing my second book. And so, yeah, just really got a whole new perspective of life. Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. And I love how God would have brought that minke whale to you. That was no coincidence, right? He knew what was required to wake up what he had placed in you, because he wants the fullness for us, right? The Absolutely. Abundance and living to life in full. And it also lines up with your passion for people as well, and encouraging them, and also getting them, encouraging them to walk in their fullness of life. So it's just, I love that God did that for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, interesting, the next day, the whole family, we had a pod of 7 minke whales around us. And as wonderful as that was, for me, the one that changed me was the one-on-one encounter. And so, it was just something about that. But then, like with the marathon journey, it has been exactly what you say. I've been encouraging other people. So other people have jumped on with me, and, we did it as a team. And they've now got this passion to run, and they're coming and thanking me for igniting this fire of change in them, and it really is, when you begin to make those changes in your life, it's amazing how infectious and contagious it becomes. And people are drawn to you, and they're like, people now are coming and say, I just want to walk with you because I want you to ignite me to want to do exercise, and so that. I'm like, if I can do that for you, then wonderful. Come walk with me, come run with me, whatever. Then so it's a really exciting journey. It's awesome.
It is exciting. And I bet, I can only imagine that you now have extended vision, like vision past what you originally thought life would be, or goals you had. I could only imagine that from this, it's like, well, actually anything's possible.
Yeah, well, definitely, because I now feel more physically capable of achieving more, whereas I would have been stuck in my limitations before. I really do have that sense that if I can run a half marathon, seriously, I couldn't even get off the couch for 5 years. I was so sick, and all my life I've never been a runner. If I can run a half marathon, then what more can I do that I didn't think I could? Yeah. And like, that. What more can I encourage other people? And the thing with the marathon was, like, I actually can't pull out of this because I'm taking a whole army of people with me that are coming because I'm doing it. And so I cannot not do this. Yeah. And I think that's the great thing about community and bringing people on the journey with you, is that actually you do it for each other. So yes, definitely there is more vision to come. There's definitely things that I see. What I did with Embrace, I don't think that's the end of the road for me. No. I think that there's definitely in some of those underprivileged areas, underdeveloped nations, definitely I'm pursuing opportunities to impact in those areas as well.
Oh, and I
So
am
watch this
cheering
space.
you on. I love it. I love it, Ange. Thank you for your stories. I know that I have no doubt that this has stirred up some things for people. It just inspired them. So how can people follow along what you do and listen to your podcasts and just connect?
Yeah, so you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook. It's the Gold Diggers Podcast. And we're also on all the major platforms. So they come out every Wednesday. You can download them. Lisa's podcast will be coming up probably next year now, early next year. So you can check out Lisa's. Also, you can contact me through my website, AngelaDawnWilliams.com.au. And yeah, I'm on Facebook as Angela Dawn Williams as well, and Instagram. So yeah, mainly those two platforms.
Excellent. Thank you, Angela. Thank you for sharing your story and imparting wisdom to us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Pleasure. Nice to see you, Lisa.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks for joining me on Brave with Lisa. I hope that it has inspired or impacted you in a small or large way. Feel free to comment, to subscribe, and share with some friends. And please join us next week on another conversation we will have here on this channel on Brave with Lisa.